Hello to my fringy family. I am Rick.
I'm Kristen.
And we are here again with another fringy episode with our really special friend, Madeline. We know you guys love Madeline, and we've gotten so much feedback from people saying, you need to have Madeline on again. We want another energy episode. We need to talk more about that. And so guess what, guys? That's what we're going to be doing tonight. She's here. If you want to say hi, Madeline.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
So glad to have you back. How's everything been? Are you in the last time that we talked to you? You've started your own YouTube channel, Leaving Babylon. Why don't you tell the people about that really quick?
Yeah, for sure. So I was on your channel 3 times before I got inspired to. Well, I mean, I was always kind of inspired, but then I heard a few other podcasts out there, people talking about these same topics. And I thought, well, my husband actually was encouraging me. He kept saying, go for it. You're doing all this research. You're just keeping it all to yourself. So I decided to step out of my comfort zone actually and get out there and do it. Because I'm not really one of those people that wants to be in the limelight. So
yeah, shout out to Will for pushing you to do that. He's such a great guy. Thanks for listening, Will. We can't wait to meet you one of these days. But with that, we're going to move into our episode because, since our last episode, people have been mind blown about how the ether interacts with everything and how energy is so important to the ancient people, and how it's just kind of gone away, right? All we know about energy nowadays is either petrol or, some sort of electricity, all of those different things that we know as energy, but they were thinking about it very differently back then. And so we just wanted to continue that conversation and go with what else you had for us.
Yeah, we did talk a lot. I re-listened to our part 1 the other day because it's been a while. And we did talk about, just to give a little recap, we talked about how we live in an enclosed system. That's kind of the beginning of understanding that all of the energy in this realm is based on the elements. So the 5 elements of the classical elements, which are air, earth, water, fire, and ether. And we talked a bit more about that, but also how they collect it from the height of the old architecture and some of the furnishings on those. So the copper and the mercury and some of the ways they were pulling that down out of the ether. And so the electricity, the static electricity in the air was another part of that. So yeah, that was the foundation. And I think there is so much to this topic. It's crazy. I mean, we could probably talk for another 10 episodes about that. So what I think today, what we want to focus on is the, how do you actually, what are the mechanisms within the ether? Because we talked about how all of these energies live within the ether, how they communicate within the ether. So ether is that thing that binds everything together. And so we kind of want to just, sort of springboard off of that a little bit. And I want to start, I think, with a quote, and it's by Tesla. We talked about Tesla a couple of times already. He's kind of, I think, what most people in the Antiquitech community would think of as kind of the modern godfather of free energy, because he did a lot of testing and he documented a lot about it. So he just said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that was really how he encaptured the essence of what free energy is, how you might tap into that. And I think that's really a good place to start, just to conceptualize energy, frequency, vibration. And from those points, we talked as well about how when God created everything in Genesis 1, he spoke everything into existence. And that was, the vibration of his voice, you might say, or the frequency, the tone, however that manifested from God, however he put that forth, it created everything. So we have the fundamentals of creation right there. I think the problem with some of the concepts, though, is that they get a little bit twisted. So we have to talk about that, I think, too, just from a New Age perspective, and kind of dividing the New Age from the Christian perspective. So there's a lot of confusion, right? And I think it can get very confusing for people. So just front loading this conversation as well with, there's so many terms out there that are being utilized by the New Age community to replace God with kind of just like this force, this kind of, and almost internalizing it, saying that like, this is actually me that's, generating all of this creativity, and I'm endless in my power and all this stuff. So, and I think it's almost playing into this, what you might think of, or what I think of sometimes as a long range agenda of the enemy, which would be worship of the creation over the creator.
Yes.
And, right. So Romans 1:25 says they changed the truth of God into a lie and worshipped and served the creature more than the creator. And that is what's happening.
Bingo.
Right. So you have God who blew everything into existence. He just spoke it and it happened. And it's almost as if our minds are so almost desensitized to that kind of power that we can't even connect with this idea that God did that, So we have to, buy into all these ideas that take us down a road that is not, it's really the false light. So.
Yeah. And it's very important. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people in Christian communities are very leery of the word vibration. Like we gotta raise our vibration. And if you're living in low vibration or high vibration or all these things. And so, if a person is taught that New Age is all about that type of stuff, all of this woo-woo stuff, then it's very quick for a Christian to just push it aside and be like, well, none of that is true. Well, that can't be further from the truth. It's just a twisted truth, if that makes sense. And for a lot of people, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to realize that God is still supernatural. And that is a big deal for us to pay attention to. And I think in our modern churches and our modern Christianity, we have gotten rid of a lot of that supernatural, because it kind of, like you said, we don't have the context for it. We don't really understand it. And I believe personally, it's been hidden from us for so long that some of us that are younger, they just don't know. You just don't know what it is to even think about. A lot of people, when we started talking about ether and stuff like that, it was blowing their minds because they didn't even have the context. And that's what we talked about a little bit offline before we came on, is just having the context for how vibration works, how ether works, all of those different things. It really changes your perspective on how God kind of interacts with his world and how he has given us gifts and opportunities to tap into things. It's just been hidden from us. There's been this large deception that has kept it from us. And so that's what we're trying to do with Madeline, bringing her on, is reteaching this stuff so that we can have the context and we don't have to run away and be like, no, that's woo woo. We can't talk vibrations. That's exactly what we should be talking about, but then putting it in the right context. So I appreciate you saying all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of terms that have been hijacked by other belief systems. Even thinking about like the rainbow. Well, the rainbow now means something totally different than what it was intended for, right? Mm-hmm. So you look at all this stuff, like if you talk about meditation or you talk about stuff like that are very New Age terms, it's like, well, meditation is really just a different word for like praying and, thinking about something. And, but yeah, you're right. A lot of those terms have just kind of been hijacked. So I'm glad that, you mentioned that, because that's a good point.
Yeah. And I guess even we just talked about last time, when you speak prayer into the ether or into the air, it is a delivery system, and God's, you could even say God's tuned in. This is our understanding. Obviously, God's got it much more figured out, but when we speak into the ether, and God is tuned into us because Jesus is in us, so he hears what we're saying. And, we got even a little bit into the Ethernet, and how data is passed that way. And, we have radio waves and all of these sort of mechanisms that deliver messages and can be interpreted, so, it's very powerful. But I think, the way that the New Age would deal with it, and I can say this because I used to be deceived by the New Age. You say, well, I'm praying to the universe. Well, that could be, so vast. I mean, like not the globular universe, but like, what are you praying to? Who are you praying to? Just kind of throwing it out there and see who answers. But yeah, so it's
almost like the idea of the Force in Star Wars. It's like this. There is this force that is out there, but it isn't a thing. It isn't a god. It isn't all powerful God Almighty. It is just this force that you can manipulate. And they never talk about where it comes from or who created the force. It's just this thing that you can either manipulate for good or for evil. But that's kind of the New Age understanding, is they know that there's an ether. They know that there is a force, but they're not going to tell you where it came from or who created it. And they're not going to teach you how to use it and all of those things. Or a lot of people will teach you, especially in the occult, they'll teach you how to use it in a very negative context, right? Where they're bringing the world down where they want it to be, utilizing things that they understand, the secrets that they've figured out. But that doesn't mean that they are gods. It just means they're tapping into something that God created.
Yeah, exactly. And we know they're profiting off of it and all of that too. So, I think what they've done too is they've inverted everything. So we know that all of the light that we even see in photographs from the 1800s and 1900s at the expos would be an example. It shows that they had a lot of power. And I've done some videos on my channel, Leaving Babylon, the technocratic takeover, where they just tore down all of that energy that was producing so much light. And they made us live in the dark ages now. So they've twisted it all. They had light, and now we don't really, unless we pay them to have it. And then it's all very controlled. And they're going even further now. It's not, we're just not paying for it. Now they're actually removing like ambient light. Like it's all like LED type of light now, very overly stimulating to the nervous system and things like that. So they're taking it even further. But yeah, so just more levels of control, I guess.
Yeah.
And I listened to a whole podcast. I think it was one of the Down the Rabbit Holes, and they were talking about the changes in light bulbs. Like it seems so simple, but how they've gone from light bulbs that, for all intents and purposes, a light bulb should last you forever. But they've realized that for marketing and for, monetary purposes, they have to make them die out. They have to make them run out so that you have to buy more. And then totally switching from the type of light bulbs we used to have to, you're right, these LED ones there are so many studies about how bad it is for you to have LED lights everywhere.
Yeah. And we don't need to go down this rabbit hole, but like the purple lights that have shown up all over the world on the streets and things like that. So it's really weird why they've forced all these changes around the same time as the 5G towers came out and started getting probably switched on. I laugh because otherwise I'll cry.
Yeah, I know, that's right. If you really know what they're doing, and when you finally figure out that it's on purpose, it's just like, it's so, the level of evil is so maddening. Because just like you said, what would happen? I mean, we all grow up as children, right? And what are we when we're kids? We're afraid of the dark because we don't understand it. We don't have like we were talking about before, we don't have the context in our mind for what's going on in the dark because we can't see it. We can't see anything. And that's what they control. They control the light. And when everything goes dark, when the light in the sky goes away, in primitive times, that's the most terrifying time of the day. And you have this 8 hours or so that you are hiding as a human from animals, from all kinds of things. You have no idea what's out there and you can't see barely in front of your face, especially on a low moon. So this is how sinister they are. They could take all of that power away from us whenever they want to. They can close down the grid and say, you got nothing. You got no internet. You got no electricity. You have nothing. And people don't realize how much of a slave that makes you. It's crazy.
Yeah. And some people even need now those lights that sort of recreate the real sunlight because they can't even survive through the winter with the little light that they're getting. It's a big mental health issue for sure. I mean, and I think just the way that they've inverted everything. So, history's been inverted. Everything, our understanding of science has been inverted. Nobody gets told about ether, and just these ways that they hide everything and then they harness everything and control it. So I find it really sad that, and we talked about this, I think in one of our earlier ones podcasts was the way that cathedrals aren't being used anymore.
Right.
And I often try and imagine how heavenly it would have sounded with all these cathedrals, the bells ringing for the services or for special occasions. And, this kind of like really lively, like frequency
and vibration
through the air. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think just moving on from that topic. So if we can imagine all of the natural, it was so natural, all of the energy, all of this distribution of different kinds of energy. So you'd have had steam energy, which it was very powerful. I mean, they were running steam engines. They were pulling heavy loads with it. They were probably using it in the building of many of those buildings that we see. They would have used it for heating, anything. You get those really nice old radiators that would give out awesome heat with just steam.
Yeah.
So water, and I know that there were water car engines before they kind of shut that down so that they could sell petroleum, right? So, and water is just extremely powerful. I was watching a video just detailing a guy who had built, a steam powered car motor and it could go over 100 miles an hour. And it could go forever, like on just a tiny bit of water as well.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I think, steam engines, they had moving entire trains with steam. Like, why couldn't we use that in a car?
Yeah.
But it all just seems so much more efficient,
right. And cleaner.
The efficiency and it's just, not only is it better, works better, does everything, but it's clean. And you have them talking about how, we're polluting too much and we're doing this and we're doing that. So it's like, well, let us use steam. Let us use frequency and vibration. Let us use ether to power everything. Like, you guys have created this and now you're blaming it on us. It's wild. Yeah,
because back in the day, in these old cathedrals and these beautiful buildings, they didn't have wiring, right, running through the buildings, correct?
I think they did.
Okay.
Yeah, but it would have been more. It was just in there. It wasn't like they were charging for it, right? Because it was just pulling down free energy, and it was producing light out of the whatever light sources they would have had, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a certain amount of wiring, but they would have also had gas lighting too.
That's true.
Yeah. And that's actually another point to be made is they used gas, natural gas, because there's natural gas because it's all over the world. But what they did was they moved over to coal. So they, instead of using the gas to heat, which was pure, like free and clean, they started generating the coal heat to make gas, or coal to make gas. So they started, engineering that, because then you can sell coal. So that was kind of like the early stage of the Industrial Revolution. I think that was part of what they did. So they got everything off of that kind of nice, clean, free gas, natural gas, and then they put it into coal, and that kind of made everything really gross. And then and now we're moving away from all of that, and now we're going into this electric industry, and then who knows what else. But yeah, so I think, just going back to the I think just a little bit more around that New Age stuff. So just so that people are familiar with some of the terms that are used, there's kind of these secret knowledge. Everyone wants to know something that they're not telling you. It's like finding out a secret. You want to go and you want to find stuff that it makes you feel, I don't know, you get a little bit of a rush out of it. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of exciting because but if you don't actually weigh everything up against the scriptures, you are going to get lost in a bunch of garbage information. So some of those are like spirit sciences. And I know that there is a lot of talk about toroid fields and stuff like that. So where we have this kind of shape of the earth that isn't, so you could still believe in a flat earth, for example, but you might have this kind of magnetic thing going around it that makes it look like a ball still, that kind of thing. And then you'd have your axis mundi in the middle. And then this kind of gets translated by the New Age as being this force, like you mentioned, that force that sort of is in everything, and it's kind of generated through everything. Every living, biological thing on Earth kind of generates this energy. And that would be, I would say those are a few of the hallmarks of the New Age thing. And so just weigh up against the Bible and the Holy Spirit with that stuff. And we do see things like the Fibonacci sequence, which is that number, it consecutively creates the perfect fingerprint in everything. So the Fibonacci sequence sometimes gets mistranslated as well, because they start calling it sacred geometry. And all of these words, like they start talking about the spiral of life, the tree of life, chi, and and these are words that come out of Eastern mysticism, and they come out of those meditation kind of Buddhist, Hindu cultures. And, those cultures were very heathen, and they were also probably trying to understand themselves what these energies were. And so, deceived or not, that's how they were translating them. But yeah, so I guess we can start moving into more of the frequency sound stuff. And so Tesla talks about, there's a lot of different sort of forces that move through our realm. And some of those are currents and lines of force, what Tesla talked about. He called them Berglund currents. And they're basically kind of like running through the earth. So they're like currents of electricity that run through the earth. And if you know how to use the right materials to get to them, you can pull on that energy, which he did. And so that would be like a frequency in the earth. And that's where you get your toroid idea. So, some people call that electromagnetic. It's also probably more likely to be plasma and, that kind of ether component in the earth.
Well, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but doesn't the earth have what is it called? The Schumann resonance? That is basically the earth's vibration. It has a certain, I can't remember what the number is, like 7.4 or something. Anyway, it has its own frequency. The earth has its own hum that it's just constantly humming. And I don't think a lot of people realize that that's what they're talking about when they say the Schumann resonance. That's what they're talking about, is this hum, this vibration that the earth is always putting off. And a lot of people think it's the sound of that toroid field, if you will.
Yeah. And there's other words for it too. I don't know if it's the same thing, but telluric currents and terrestrial magnetism. There's a few other words for it. So yeah, I think but it's all connected. So that I don't like this, anyway, the earth and the air are connected. I'm not going to use other phrases for that. But yeah, so I think, something we have to if we move off of the idea of the cathedrals, then we want to talk about sort of acoustics. And this is really, Kristen, you sing, right? You're a singer.
Well, I try to.
Yeah. I heard that one of your podcasts. And I'm a classically trained singer, so I understand the mechanisms that is involved.
Do we have a duet on our hands?
Maybe
Oh my God.
An album together, yeah.
Yeah, that's for another one, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess just starting with sound, like sound is a physical phenomenon, but it would not exist if there was no medium. So if there was no ether to distribute it, we wouldn't have sound. It would just be a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
So it's based on vibrations and waves. As we all probably learned in school, you got sound waves going through the air. It would go through gases, liquids, solids, plasmas, anything. So sound will travel through pretty much anything. And then you have, if you build on that, so you look at the cathedrals and you see all these beautiful shapes on them, right? So most of us have by now probably seen the sonic frequencies playing out on water plates and sound plates. And if you haven't, I encourage anybody listening to go look at that. It's really, really interesting. And so they do all these tests, like if you, and sand as well. So you can do it with sand, you can do it with water, and you change the frequency on these plates, vibration plates, and then they just turn the frequency up and down, and you can see different shapes take place. And this is where the idea of sacred geometry comes from. And some people would call it the flower of life. So these sorts of sonic frequencies. And then they start to apply that to human consciousness and saying, like, these are, and I don't disagree with the fact that the frequencies do actually impact us physically, spiritually, emotionally, and in all those ways. And that's why music actually really can hit you, right? In one way or another. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true, because they actually, the military uses frequencies to hurt people as crowd control. They actually have weaponized systems that they can point a frequency at a person or at a crowd of people, and they can disperse those people because the people feel like they're going to explode from the inside out. And that's actually like a patented military DARPA weapon. And so, so there is something to be said about the frequency that they can harness and use. So there could be a good feeling that you get from frequencies that would lift you up, and then there's also ones that can bring you down. So there is something to that, but it just depends on who's manipulating the frequencies.
Yeah. And I think some people are more tuned in to musical frequency. Like some people don't seem to be as touched by music as other people. Yep. So yeah. I always find it, because I'm very touched by music, and I have different responses to it depending on what kind of music it is. And yeah,
me too. I cry in movies, and that's usually the reason. I think it's because of the music. I don't think it really has much to do with obviously they couple the music with what's going on. But for me, I'm very in tune to music. And I think that's why I'm always like, what? I'm not crying. You're crying, because the music is usually very powerful in those moments.
Yeah. It's crazy too. Like I'm always humming all the time. Like between me and Rick, we're humming constantly. I don't know what it is and how I ended up marrying somebody that also hums all the time. But there's been so many times where people are like, are you like feeling nervous or, and I'm like, no. And they're like, well, you're humming. Like that's usually something that people do when they're like nervous or, you know, like have some anxiety, then they'll kind of hum to themselves to calm themselves down. And I'm like, no, I just hum all the time, I guess. But it's like now that I pay attention to it, it's most of the day I'm humming, which is weird. I guess it's self-soothing or something. I don't know.
That's really interesting. It probably does have, you know, it's that spiritual connection to the air around you. I think it's just, yeah. And I think, you know, you think of things like a mother with the baby inside, you know, she's carrying a baby or holding it, or dad, you know, holding the baby on his chest, and you get that frequency that comes through to the baby. And it's so important for a child to have that. It's really good for the brain development and all of that. So
even just the heartbeat, like, you know, when they're on your chest and they can hear your heartbeat, or, you know, they have like teddy bears now that they have little speakers in that do like a heartbeat sound for newborn babies, because they're so used to hearing your heartbeat when they're inside. Obviously they can hear all of that stuff. Yeah, so true. And so I think you also, and this is getting back to the cathedral thing, but when you're singing, when you're producing sound, there's so many mechanisms involved that we don't even realize half the time. Like even the little bones in your face, you know, in your areas of your face that are projecting the sound, and like the muscles and, you know, your lungs that push the air through, and then the valves that kind of control the tone or the pressure of the air, so volume and all of that. So in the cathedrals, you had your pipe organs, and you had those are amazing. I don't know. I know.
Yeah. Did you say you were in a cathedral where they had
it was
like downtown LA. Yeah, he was marrying his cousin, and these pipe organs, it wasn't just like, it was in every wall of
it was
of
built
the building.
into
it was
the church.
It was like, you know, obviously the great big one up in front, like behind the stage, but it was on the side walls, it was on the back walls. There was pipes everywhere, and when they played that thing, it was
the
like
whole building.
Yeah, it shook your whole body. It was so crazy.
That's amazing. I mean, I bet there's not many pipe organ players around anymore.
Yeah.
I know.
But I bet you they had a lot more of those back then, you know, and there is something to be said about that vibration in there where you're like, what was that used for? Why would you build it all in there? Is that just to be cool? I don't think so. I mean, that takes a lot of work and expensive, you know, so for somebody to build that into the whole building, you have to have some sort of a reason for it, because, you know, people don't spend money just to do it. They want it to happen, or this is leftover, which I believe more of a leftover type of a cathedral that they've repurposed now, and it's like a Catholic church now. And we see that pretty often, right? A lot of these Roman Catholic churches, a lot of these huge basilicas, they have all of that type of architecture that really resonates all of that sound in there, and you can't really duplicate that without, I mean, we're talking, as we go back to, they're talking about 1800s that these people built these things with hammers and chisels and horses and buggies, right? And we're looking at them now like there's no way that you guys built this resonating tuning fork basically to harness this type of frequency just with hammers and chisels. Like, get out of here. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
And I mean, some cathedrals, you could literally whisper at one end of the cathedral and you'd be able to hear it at the other end.
I've heard of buildings like that.
Yeah, the acoustics are amazing. I read a quote recently by Goethe. He said, I call architecture frozen music, which I think is really, really interesting. because we're all like, how did these get built? How did that happen? So just a little bit of something we need to probably investigate some more. But when you consider those beautiful cymatic kind of designs all over these cathedrals, it's like, you know, not hard to imagine if it was water and it was frozen and, you know, God spoke. You know, I just think of the verse where Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. And where I go, you know, you'll be there with me. And it's like that idea that maybe it was all a creation, part of his creation, you know. Yeah. So just something I have whirling around in my head, like, how could that have happened? Trying to imagine. But maybe Goethe knew something that we didn't. So anyway, true. And the thing about the cathedrals is what we were saying before is like, it's almost like an anatomy. It's like a musical anatomy, like almost like a biological design. So you would have like if you look from one end to the other, you could see almost like a throat, you know, you could almost see it like a ribbed kind of trachea or whatever you call it here, like your, you know, your breathing tube. And then as you go down, this, you know, like say you whisper or say you press a button on the organ, that sound just vibrates all the way down. So the vibrational transference, the conduction, and how the sound just gets passed right to the very end of the cathedral and probably out to the outside as well. So in your, like just looking, I like to compare anatomy with the cathedrals. And I just think, you know, there was pipes, there was the shape, there was those kind of rib, you know, the kind of, I don't know what they call them, but those bits that stick out. So it kind of gives that vibration all the way down. And then you have the bellows, which would have been the pipe organ actually pushing the air all through. And all of that would have required a lot of architectural, you know, engineering. And we do know that they had very, I would say, highly developed steam mechanisms or machinery throughout all of that era. From what we can see from all their buildings, they would have these, you know, radiators, like steam radiators, and so their pneumatic design and their steam design and all of that kind of engineering was really built into everything. And one of the hypotheses, I don't know if anyone got to the end of my last video, but the hypothesis at the end is that the reason they mud flooded everything, why they had to mud flood everything, was because the infrastructure of power that was coming into the buildings, whether it was natural gas or steam or whatever else, would have been down underneath the buildings. So if you want to cover that up, you have to flood it, you have to liquefy it, and you have to get it far enough down that nobody's going to bother digging down that far. And then you can take all of the top layers off the buildings, like all of those spires and everything. And then all you've got left is your building. And then you can kind of reconstruct it from there, right?
Yeah. And that's a huge point, because not only did they take away the spires and all of that, but going back to what you talked about before is the bells. Like, how many bells are still around? They've taken them all away. We don't have any bells. I mean, I'm sure there's some places in Europe somewhere that have some bells, but for the most part, they've all been kind of taken away. And we have to ask ourselves,
or at least not used anymore.
Why did they have bells all over the place before, and now they have none, or very, very little? And I think there is a huge thing that came to me the other day with the Liberty Bell, because we all know about the Liberty Bell, and you've had an episode on liberty and kind of all of the understanding of what liberty really looks like and really means. And there's that crack right down the Liberty Bell.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, that hit me really hard, because it's like they're calling this the Liberty Bell, but it's really an understanding of your freedom is in this vibration, this healing of these bells. And I think that's what they used a lot of this stuff for back then, was to connect with each other spiritually, connect with God spiritually, and a lot of healing that the frequencies could bring to everybody. And when you crack that bell, it doesn't work anymore. So it's almost a sick joke that they have a bell that's cracked and it says liberty.
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's very symbolic, isn't it? And I think sounds like it's intentional. I would jump straight to intentional for that one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and just to, like, I even feel like, I think it was not that long ago that Big Ben in London stopped ringing. They intentionally stopped it from ringing right on they called it the Corona eclipse. Like, was it 2012 or something like that? I can't. Anyway, it was a few years back, but it was literally on that day of the eclipse, they stopped Big Ben ringing.
Yeah, like they burned Notre Dame. Like, does anybody think that fire was an accident? It's like they burned down Notre Dame, this huge cathedral that was so beautiful and probably had a lot of frequency and vibration possibilities that you could take from it, but it got burned. And they've been doing that. They've been burning a lot of these places and getting rid of all of this stuff for a very long time. So we shouldn't be shocked. But when we see big stuff like that happen, it's like, there goes another one. They're trying to get rid of these buildings as we catch on. They got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So would a building like that, like in a town, would you have like one building and that would be able to harness and supply energy for the whole town? How does that work?
Yeah. Have you traveled to Europe at all?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, there seems to be cathedrals around every corner. So maybe each cathedral had a different purpose, like a different kind of power. Maybe one of them was more electrical based, maybe the other. Because actually here in my city, we were driving to church on Sunday and I noticed there are 3 churches, big cathedrals, old style, like old world cathedrals, right next to each other.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're not in the same style. There's one that's more Gothic, and then there's another one that's a little bit more like squarish, and then there's another one that's got some spires on it, but it's not Gothic. And I was like, there's 3,
Interesting.
So maybe they just serve different purposes, but yeah, I think the bells were a huge part of it. And when you think about the healing aspect of it and the ether. So we all live inside this ether plasma and these frequencies. And we can, think about how it's not just going to stop as soon as it hits our ears. The sound isn't just going in our ears.
Right.
The sound is like going on to everything, right?
Yeah.
So it's passing through your body. It's passing through everything that you are. And yeah, I would agree. I think there's definitely a more of a natural healing quality to that, because the way that a bell works is like, it's not like listening to music on your stereo. There's the pendulum would hit the side of the bell and then the frequency would actually irradiate from that. So it would be distributed through the air, but in a very natural kind of, consecutively reduction, it would reduce very, very slowly, depending on your bell size and kind of the way that the thickness maybe of the metal, right? So I think the way that works is just more natural in our environment. And everything's been electrified. That's the other thing, is like, how do we replicate that with electricity? I don't know if we can. Like, I don't know if electric sound can replicate that.
I don't think so. And if you think about like throwing a rock into water, it has that, you can almost see that. You could see the frequency, you know what I mean? Because it's naturally makes a certain distance between those, and it gets bigger and bigger or smaller and smaller, depending on, you know, how big your rock is and all of that. And you can throw several rocks in different intervals, and you'll get those different rings, but they're all kind of doing the same thing, just in different spots. And so when they would ring the bells, they could do it very slow. As you heard, a lot of them in old times, they would do really slow rings where that would resonate for a long time, but they could also ring it really fast. And the ringing really fast is more of the annoying, right? Where everybody, that's to tell the town everybody's in danger. So there was different ways that you could switch the frequency, or all frequency is the amount of times that a ripple happens, basically, right? That's the frequency of the wave.
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand that as a wave's going, it's the distance between the two mountains, if you will, in the wave.
Yeah.
And so that is your frequency. So you can spread those mountains out, or you can bring them closer together. And that's how you change the frequency. And so hitting that bell really fast makes everybody freak out because that's too much. But hitting it really slow and methodical gives everybody a very calming, very healing process.
Yeah, that's actually a really important thing, as you say, to realize, because recurrence, like frequency, is the recurrence of the tone. So how many times it happens in that wave. But the other thing about that is the harmonics, where you get 10 different waves all happening together, right? So the harmonic part of that is really important, which, again, even when I'm at church, I mean, I always sing harmony because my ear is tuned to catch the harmony in a song. But not many people sing like that anymore. And so the old hymns, we used to get all of the different harmonies, and people would sing that. And even the bells, you might have like 6 bells hanging, and each one would have a different note to it. So when they played, it played a harmony. And so any kind of even stringed instruments, you get your guitars, your pianos, a harp, you know, anything like that has a harmonic frequency. So,
well, you think on a piano, you push the A key and it sounds, you know, one way, and then you do the chord of A where you're using 3 different keys, and it sounds so much more full and so much more rich because you've then added in, you know, other tones to it.
Yeah, exactly. I miss harmony at church. I still remember it from when I was growing up, and somehow it's got lost along the way. But
my sister's the same way, Bethany. She almost always sings in harmony. Like, she has a really hard time sticking with melody because the harmony is just what she hears, which works out perfect because I am garbage at harmony. It's like I cannot do it. Ask Rick, I'm just like, I don't know what
just always wandering back to the melody.
Yep.
It's always the go-to, the melody, right? So like if you lose your harmony, you can just get back there. Yeah, and then we think of the emotional aspect of these harmonies and frequencies, and we look at examples from the Bible, like David playing the harp for Saul, you know, and how that had such a spiritual effect that he was actually being demonically, oppressed, but the harmonics of the harp were kind of relieving for him, and they calmed his spirit. So I think from that we know that there's that, and then we have, you know, different sounds in nature like rain, you know, water, the running of water, and those natural frequencies that we pick up, and birds singing, and
yeah, so you can put those on your phone because you live in a wooden box. We all build these wooden boxes to live in, right? And we're outside of nature, but then we want to put those on our phone so that we can listen to nature, so we can fall asleep. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
A little ironic, yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. I even saw on, it's amazing though, technology is pretty cool, because I even saw someone had a bird and it was on their hand or something, and they had slowed down the sound of its song, just to the point where you could actually see its neck moving, and its whole body was like contracting with every sound, and it was kind of, it was using its whole body to produce these sounds. And And the intricacy of what we would hear very quickly when it slowed down is just incredible. The notes that they hit in quick succession, and and
it just came to me thinking of bells. Like when do we hear bells the most? It's usually around Christmas time, right? When everybody's hearing all of the bells, and that's like the happiest time of the year for everybody. Yeah. That's an interesting correlation that just came to my mind. It's like everybody's the happiest around Christmas, but there's bells going off all the time.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. We don't really hear bells anymore other than maybe at Christmas.
Right.
Sometimes I guess if there's a wedding in a nice old church, they'll play bells, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, I think the other examples we could see, the examples of frequency maybe in a different kind of way would be those really high frequencies that can even shatter glass. So, you can get to such extremes that it will actually break something physical. And even frequencies you can't hear, maybe a dog can hear them and that kind of thing. But also the walls of Jericho are another example of a frequency that had a physical impact. Obviously, God was involved in that, but used the sound of the people. And as I think you mentioned earlier, they know that the frequencies, controlling frequency controls people. Mm-hmm. And so when we moved out of that time frame where the churches were harnessing frequency for healing and for the betterment of the people and for the good of the people, it seems like the changeover to what I would call the enemy or the controllers now means we are subject to bad frequencies, right? Yeah. So I think it was Joseph Goebbels and his cohort decided to change the frequencies on the international standards, broadcasting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the musical tuning that they do for all music is 440, I believe, and I think it used to be 432.
Yeah.
And you can actually see, like you were talking about before, where you put a sand on a speaker, and if you play the frequency 432, it makes a pattern. It makes sense. But then when you turn it to 440, which is what we're all listening to all the time, it jumbles and it looks like chaos. And that's what we're hearing all the time is that chaos.
Yeah.
Weird. It makes you wonder at concerts or like at, Astro World or whatever that, some of these Taylor Swift concerts, like, do you think that they're using those type of frequencies to, manipulate people or harm people or?
I would think so. That sounds like what they were doing to me, and using it almost in like a summoning kind of way. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We talked before about how music can spiritually impact you. It sounds to me like there was some evil spiritual connection going on there with that as well.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. I mean, my parents were missionaries for a while in Haiti, and they would go to sleep at night hearing the drums of the, I've lost the name for it, but the spiritual activity that is known in Haiti.
Oh yeah,
witchcraft.
Can't remember.
Anyway,
we're just gonna have to add it in later. It's just gonna be me yelling it from the other room.
Yeah, voodoo.
There it is. Voodoo.
And so my parents knew from like way back, they could hear the sound of voodoo in music in North America. After they moved back here, they were like, that's a voodoo beat or that's a voodoo sound. And I think not many people would know that, right? So it's easy just to put it into music and have it impact people without them even knowing.
I mean, think of a place like New Orleans, Brixton there. I haven't been there, but there's a lot of voodoo and a lot of stuff like that down there. And everybody that I've talked to that's been there has said there is this weird, like a spiritual oppression that people feel when they're there. It's a very strange vibe, very weird vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of chilling, I think, in a way, especially if you're a Christian, maybe you have a better sense of it. But yeah, so I think on the flip side of that, you have the bells that they used for ceremony, right? So like in church, they would use a bell for what they called a sacring bell, and it would just be rung to initiate a service, for example. So they would go ringing a bell through. And again, it just indicates to me that God's music is very natural, and it's very much a part of our environment. And I believe it is for healing as well as other things. Like light is very healing, isn't it? And the energy, the sunlight. So one of the things I found out actually is that this was quite interesting to me. There is something called, just looking at my notes here, something called, it's like creating light from frequency and water. And there's a name for it.
Yes. What is that called?
You can take out me going, but yeah, so I mean, just part of that.
Structured water. Is that what you're thinking of? Structured water?
I think it's bioluminescence.
Oh, that would make sense.
Yeah, like fluorescence in
right.
Water. If you stir seawater, you can see the light.
Oh yeah.
There's
like algae puts off a certain bioluminescence. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's even fungus in forests that give off bioluminescence depending on their time of, whatever they're doing in their little cycles. And but yeah, so bioluminescence is another thing that we could call a kind of an interaction with frequency. And so the excitation. So think about this now. When you think about that, think about the aurora borealis. What if, just putting this out there, what if the saints and the heavenlies are singing and we get this sort of color forming in the sky?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
that phenomena has always been interesting to me.
Well, and just knowing that whatever's going on up there is super. I don't want to say magical, but it's so. It is. It's kind of magical, the way that these lights are coming off, and a lot of people are thinking that it's coming from, a hole in the ground or something, but it's got to be something that has to do with frequency, right? Because the only way that you can see these lights like that is if something is making that happen, and it happens in a very interesting dance, right? It's not just lights projecting into the sky, as a lot of people would say. That's like, lights coming off of the Luxor in Vegas or something like that. This is straight up light. We're talking about this dance that it does in the sky, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because lights don't interact like that. They just don't do that unless somebody is, putting something in front of them and making them dance, but they're moving on their own, which is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that concept really, really cool. And then when you look at, so just on the others, up in the firmament, we have the stars. And when you zoom in on those, they are kind of moving in this almost pulsating and like emitting, light here and there and patterns and things like that. So, and it says the heavens declare the glory of God. Declaration is like it's something that you verbalize. It's not just, like, to me, that's a sound word. It's not, sometimes I think we've been, I was conditioned to think of that as it declares the glory of God in that it's telling us just by the fact it's there. But declaring to me is actually more of an intentional, you're putting something out there.
It's doing something. And I think that's the part that they've been trying to hide from us, is there is a lot more life to this world. I mean, when you look into trees and the way that they interact with the world around it, it's very interesting. When you think about plants and how they grow, if the sun is blocked, or if the sun is blocked in a certain way, they will move and grow towards the sun because they know that they need to go there to get that sun. It's like there's so much more life to the earth and connection than I think we've ever been able to understand because they haven't let us. And once we realize that like everything is free, like Tesla said, everything is frequency and vibration because that's how God ordered it to work. That's why the Fibonacci sequence is what it is, because it is order in everything. It is the signature of God because you can find it in every living thing. And when people think about life, or declaring something, they think about, well, us. We're the only ones that can really live and declare something. But trees can do it. The wind can do it. The sky can do it. I mean, there is so much life, even in the stars, like you said. It's not just a ball of gas that they want us to believe. It's actually, when you zoom in on it, as you just said, it's doing lots more than just burning gas. It's pulsating. It has a dance to it. It has movement. It has its own life. And that's what the Bible says, right?
Yeah. It's very
true. Do you
true.
mind going back for a second, Rick or Madeline, and just explaining the Fibonacci sequence a little bit more? I mean, I have like a very basic understanding of it, but maybe people listening don't have any idea what it is.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, I'm going to just give a very short understanding, and then I'll let Madeline take it from there. Basically, it's a mathematical equation that works to draw a little square and then a rectangle and then another rectangle, and it all begins to draw this spiral. And most people have seen this. They just might not know that that's what it's called. And so the numbers go up in such a way that it begins to make these shapes. And then when you look at like a sunflower, as an example, at its very basic form, it is this little spiral. But as that spiral turns into another spiral and into another spiral and into another spiral, it creates a sunflower. And so it's the base level of life, basically. So I'll let Madeline take it from there.
Yeah, it actually, just like you said, though, I mean, you can see it in a sunflower, but you could also see it I think one of the common visualizations is like the inside of a snail shell, where you can see the little sections as they build up into this kind of ever increasing spiral. So it's the sum of the two preceding numbers. So if you have a 0 and then a 1, your next number would be 1. But then you would have the 1 and the 1, so your next number would be 2. And then you would have the 1 and the 2, so your next number would be 3. So it's just the sum of the two preceding numbers. And what it does is it creates a perfect sequence that is visible. Like, I think one of the other good visualizations of that is a fern, how it grows out of its little curled shape into the leaf, right? And everything's very symmetrical and sequential, and
waves in the ocean is another way that I've seen it explained, is every wave is creating a Fibonacci sequence every single time.
Wow.
And so as the wave goes up and curls, it's going to curl at a certain point and then it crashes at a certain point. The wave cannot continue past the Fibonacci sequence. It goes and it crashes. And so every single wave that you see that actually goes up and creates the curl is a Fibonacci sequence every time.
And that sequence works perfectly until something interferes with it. Like with a wave curling, then it would hit the water below, right? So that kind of stops the sequence.
So in like a plant, this is what's crazy about the Fibonacci sequence, is in a plant like a sunflower, in the seed that you put in the ground, that information that knows how to make that sequence is in that seed. And that is the craziest part, right? Is at the very beginning, you put it into the ground, it knows that 0 and 1 is 1 and 1 and 1 is 2, and it does it itself. And it's not a mathematician, obviously. So something, or
designed it that way.
Someone designed this sequence to happen all throughout nature, and you can find it in everything. So if you guys want to go onto YouTube, or anybody that's listening wants to know more about that, I highly recommend finding a video that gives you lots of visuals, because it will spark a deep rabbit hole for you.
Right, because people have used it to like guess lottery numbers and all kinds of crazy stuff. But
well, the way that they
or the stock market.
I'm going to go. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm going to go on a little bit of a conspiracy tangent. The way that they can manipulate the stock market and manipulate things is by using these things, Fibonacci sequence, and certain mathematical norms that we as people don't get taught in school. So they can use it against us because we don't understand how it works. But when we do, we can see what they're doing, and we can see the manipulation. It becomes very apparent.
Okay, thank you. I just had that little rabbit trail I wanted to
that's really
ask
good.
you guys about.
Sometimes we assume that everybody knows what we're talking about because,
because we're nerds.
Yeah.
Rick and my dad were talking about it one night, and I'm like, "Wait, the what?
Oh,
I don't even know that word you're saying." And then they were explaining it to me. But
is that a made up word? Did you just make that word up?
Okay. It sounds like an Italian designer, like a handbag, Fibonacci.
It does. Yeah, I'm going to get my Fibonacci handbag.
There you go. Maybe we'll start a company. Me and Madeline will design Fibonacci handbags.
Yeah. We'll have musical notes on it.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
That'll be beautiful.
Yeah. So I don't think we can finish talking about frequencies until we talk about HARP. And maybe that's just like something we should touch on. So HARP is spelled HAARP, and it's an acronym, and it stands for High Frequency Active Aural Research Project, which sounds very sciencey. But effectively, it's a very powerful, and there's not just one of them. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them. Yeah. There's actually one not far. So that one is up in Alaska. And there is another one in Alaska, in Fairbanks, Alaska, and that's called the High Power Aural Stimulation Observatory. And so they basically, I think, do the same thing. They're kind of heating the ionosphere, so that upper layer of the atmosphere, that where we would consider ether to probably be its most concentrated, I would think, as it gets higher. So they basically jam communication systems. I think they're probably controlling the communication systems that way because we know, well, I know there's no such thing as satellites. And I think a lot of what they do is transferred through the ether up in those higher levels, which is why you pay for data, right? So if you think of Ethernet transfers data packets through a wire, but the air transfers packets of data. And if you don't control the air, you don't control those data packets, and therefore you can't charge people for them. So, yeah. So what they do is they also weather control. They use it for a lot of different things. They control the weather. And this is done through microwave technology. So it's basically 180. This is just HARP, speaking of HARP right now, but it's 180 antenna array. And they beam radio frequencies into the sky. And basically they say they're studying the ionosphere. I know in some places they also have lasers, high-powered lasers, just blasting into the sky. So, you can just let your imagination wonder why they're doing all of that. But so they control the jet streams that way, through the microwave technology. They can direct, they can increase heat, they can decrease heat, they can create hurricanes, tornadoes, they can cause rain. And basically, so we think of people on the Weather Channel as like having studied a degree and they can just tell what's going to come, but actually it's likely that they know what's coming because someone's actually telling them what kind of weather is on the way.
Yeah, they basically just get like a printout of what it's going to be from a higher up, and they don't know who higher up is. It just happens.
Exactly. And initially, I believe it was a military operation owned by the government, the US government. And it was, again, they can create earthquakes. They can actually, so think of all the, if you want to think of the money component, the economic component to that, how much money is generated from rebuilding after an earthquake, or insurance, like selling insurance, and all of those premiums go up, and, all the knock-on effects to that. So having that kind of power over the frequencies, and then you put your 5G towers into that system and all of these other things, you're removing all the good frequencies, and now you're just filling the air with all of their specialized, highly tuned frequencies because they've been studying this for so long. They know exactly how to set things, and they can start actually, I know from research that they can deliver messages right into your brain now. So these frequencies are actually sending messages right into our minds. And I believe that the power of the Holy Spirit is one of the immunizations we can have against this.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how they do the telepathy, right? The fake telepathy. A lot of people think that when they have an alien encounter, they're encountering an alien that's talking to them in their mind, but it's fake, right? The alien is fake. It's been created to scare you on purpose, and the frequencies and technology that they know how to use to get inside your brain makes it seem as if they are this supernatural being from outer space and they can talk inside your brain. That's not how it works. It's all technology. It's all technology. They can put that in your brain with this little green man that they've created this to scare people, and obviously to continue with their space narrative and their fear of aliens and all those different things. Like it's all technology. You guys have to realize that underground, they've been doing a lot of stuff. In the ocean, they've been doing a lot of stuff, and they've been researching on people for a long time. I mean, like David Paulides and his Missing 411, like all of these people that just disappear, or people that get abducted in these UFOs and stuff. They're not taking these people to other planets. They're taking them to their underground facilities, and they're doing this type of research on them, the research that they need to know how to do so that they control the population in mass. And for some people, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that. That's not happening. But that's been happening, right? When we talk about things like MK Ultra and those type of things, like they were doing that way back. And so if they've already been just messing with people that way, they're abducting people and trying to figure out how this technology works. And then once they've figured it out, then they can control the population at mass. They can put that stuff into things like Facebook and Twitter, and they know how to create 5G towers. They know how to do all that stuff because they've done it to people in these underground bases. And a lot of people have a hard time with that, but that's what these evil people do. That they want to know how to manipulate the whole creation. And that's the deception, right? That if you want to deceive everybody, then you have to have control over the whole operation. And that's how they gain control, is they understand frequency, vibration, light, all of those different things. And then they create these facilities like Madeline's talking about, HARP, and they put them all over the world.
I was going to say, are there like a bunch of them all over the place, or are there just like, main like hubs, or how does like a HARP station affect the weather here versus there? Is it two different ones? How does that work?
I think they work them all together so that, the coordinated effect, right? Like if you want to create global warming, you're going to have to coordinate with everyone on like all of the stations to get on the same page.
Right.
And there's also things like ley lines and stuff like that people have to realize, that like she was talking about before, how the currency runs through, or the current, the electrical current runs through the earth. We also have electrical currents and everything like that running through the ionosphere. And so if you put certain things on certain ley lines, they've learned that you can control the whole thing. and that's why they build certain buildings in a specific spot on purpose, because they can control those currents and do all that. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I think something that allows them to more effectively even mind control is the chemicals that they expose us to, whether that be the chemming, the spraying, or the toothpaste. I don't want to say a bad word on here, but
yeah,
and all of those things that actually poison us for specific reasons to make us more complacent, for one thing, but also to make us more susceptible to those frequencies that they're shooting at us.
Yeah, because there's aluminum and all that stuff, right? There's aluminum from the sky. Aluminum even goes into, if you look at your deodorant and stuff like that, a lot of people don't realize there's aluminum in your deodorant. When you put it on, it's going into your armpit. All of those different aluminums in your, those things that they put in your arms, they have these type of chemicals that are heavy metals that are making you a better antenna. How do you make a person a better antenna? Well, you can add some heavy metals to it and the frequencies work better. You're more of an antenna now.
And just think about, okay, let's just say they're planning something, right? So they're going to plan this big event that's going to happen, affecting everyone in the world. So what they actually can do ahead of time using these frequencies in conjunction with all of these chemicals that make us more susceptible to these frequency suggestions and what it's putting into our brains. So let's say they decide they want to roll out a new pharmaceutical product to the entire world all at the same time. They first create the state of mind. So they want you to have this kind of very easily triggered state of mind. So they start filling the air with all these chemicals. They know that people are drinking the water with the stuff in it. And then they're going to start blasting these frequencies through probably 5G towers, probably HARP all over the world switched on. And then they start delivering the information to you. And then people start freaking out because they don't realize they have already been primed for this moment subconsciously. And this is what they do. So, whether it be, and I think everyone is so locked into current events more than ever before. It's immediate.
Yeah.
These alert systems that you get. Did you get one today? I don't know if it's the same for you guys. Okay.
I did not.
We got one today. And they are literally programming you to click OK, because it gives them a good idea of how quickly people are responding to their phones.
Oh, okay.
Let's be careful of that. I don't do it. I actually escape out of it. So I hit my middle key at the bottom. I don't click OK. And then I just clear the notification off the top. Yeah. I don't touch it because probably my one person isn't going to make a big difference, but I feel like it's me not doing what they want me to do. So,
it's my rebellion in full force.
Yeah, they will feel my wrath.
Yeah.
But anyway, so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's so crazy.
There's so many things that just wrapping your head around all of this stuff is so wild, because the frequency and the vibration, once you finally understand how this realm works, and I think that's why we push flat earth so much. That's why we talk about, how the structure of the earth actually works, how, ether, all of those different things. They're very important to us because of what it means with the fingerprint of God, what it is that he has done, how he has created this world to be so perfectly in harmony, and then understanding what the deception is, so that we can hopefully, as a culture or as a unified people, we can eventually push off these systems, that we can decide to stop wearing deodorant with aluminum in it. We can decide to do these things in and of ourselves to where we can have a little more control of our own lives. We can have a little more connection with God. Whereas, if we're just kind of walking around, not understanding how this world works, you're not really connecting with God that much. But if you understand these things, you realize that there's connection with God everywhere. And you begin to see his fingerprint in everything as you understand the Fibonacci sequence, as you understand frequency and vibration and healing. All of those different things it almost supercharges your faith, or at least it has for me.
Yeah, it is. And I think our words as well, just remembering too that the way we speak with truth, right? Jesus never lied. Jesus never said something that wasn't true. And he was of God, like he is God. So I think I'm just expressing the fact that when we speak, we have God's power coming through us, being that we have the Holy Spirit in us if we're a Christian, and we have that power to even heal, right? Like there's that healing energy. There's that the prayer over people, the comfort that our voice can bring, and as opposed to maybe sometimes when we're frustrated or angry, we can make someone else angry or frustrated, and so that's just like a very small aspect of probably what we are capable of doing. If we were to take away all these jamming frequencies that are coming into our space, if we were to take all of that away and we had all of those beautiful frequencies just flowing through the air and just people being healed, and you talk about the baptismal as well, which would have been in the cathedrals too, so you would have had those healing frequencies and vibrations in the water. People would have got in the water to be healed, and there's a lot of background history to that too. I think with the cathedrals, there's a lot of people would go there to be healed. They would go to the church almost like a hospital, and and probably the natural springs coming out of the ground, we're feeding those. And I know there was one church I was looking at, there was 6 natural springs coming into the church, from underneath. So you have to think, wow, all the minerals and all of the just the natural nutrients that would have been in that water. I was hearing something earlier today. It was in Spanish, but I was watching the subtitles, and they said, did you know that river water, lake water, it has so many natural nutrients in it? And people would have been, as long as it was a flowing source of water, they would have been drinking those natural sources. But when they bottle the water, they sterilize it.
Yeah.
And now they've sold us on this idea that bottled water is better for you.
Right. And distilled water, like you said, they're distilling it, so they're taking everything out of it. That would be healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a good conversation. We're I think we might have to do a part 3.
Yes. We have so much more to say.
I know, it's crazy. I look down and I'm like, have we really been talking that long? But it's so fun just to talk about this stuff, and hopefully you guys out there in the audience, you're learning so much. We are giving all of this information because we want you guys to be as excited about God as we are. We want you to be as excited about this realm that you live in as we are. And I know a lot of times we talk about the negativity, the negative parts about what they've done, but let's think sometimes about the positive and what all of the possibilities are of what we've been talking about in these last 2 episodes with Madeline, the possibilities of frequency and healing, and the possibility of think about the music that you're listening to. Think about what that's doing to you and to your children and to your family. Think about, the water, like we just talked about, what the water that you're putting in your body, the chemicals that you're putting on your body, all of these different things are just things to think about. There is a thing in electricity that's called a resistor, and they put these resistors on to keep those the current from going through. And a lot of times the stuff that we're doing to ourselves becomes like that, a resistor for the Holy Spirit, for God to really connect with us, or for these natural healing things to happen. And so we have to be careful that we're not allowing these resistors to be put on ourselves, so that we can get these healing frequencies that. And just think about it. What's going on in your life and how you can use this information and this knowledge to not only help yourself and your family, but help all those around you. So with that, we're going to say goodbye to Madeline for now, begrudgingly. We don't want her to go, but we will have her on again. And gosh, we just hope you guys are enjoying all of this. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you thought about this. Go over to Madeline's page, Leaving Babylon on YouTube, and hopefully you guys subscribe there and leave her comments. Tell her how she's doing, because we want to give you guys the content that you want. And so as we're supplying this content, we just need to know a little bit of feedback about how it's being received so that we can continue to give you what you want. So if you guys wouldn't mind,
I'm just realizing whenever you're talking in a fringy space like this, you get a lot of pushback from a lot of people. And so, subscribing to Madeline's channel, giving just a couple of words of encouragement it means the world to us. Like just getting those little comments on stuff is like, okay. It makes you feel like you're not alone in thinking all of this crazy stuff, because this is actually reality. But deprogramming yourself and society is very difficult. It can be very difficult for the people that are giving the information. So we appreciate you, Madeline, for sharing all of this information with us, because it's invaluable, and it'll all come together. As you start to listen to this stuff, you'll start to have more peace about the realm that we're living in, instead of it being all chaos and all, angst. You can have peace in there just with knowledge, just with knowing what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's an empowering thing. I think you said that word earlier, Kristen. Like, it's just very empowering to know that we're tapped into the highest power of all, which is God. And, and he gives us this knowledge. I mean, this is not really our own. We're being led by the Holy Spirit. And I think just knowing that is comforting as well. So.
Yeah. And just having, even just something like having our schedules all line up to be able to sit down and talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I would call a divine appointment. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen just because we decided to call up Madeline and say, can you come on today? I mean, we plan this stuff out for these divine appointments, and they're very powerful.
Yeah. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate each and every one of you that are tuning in and listening, because we know your time is valuable and you're choosing to listen to the fringies. And you could be listening to all kinds of stuff, but the freaks on the internet is what you want, and that's what you've chosen. And we're going to continue to supply all kinds of weirdness to you. So we hope you come back next week, and we'll see you guys all on the next one. Bye, guys. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye, Will.
There you go.